Hey everyone, welcome back to Poplar Preparedness. I'm Steve Poplar, and today we're going to be talking about something that's so very important. A mission critical piece of equipment that a lot of young people don't use anymore. And yet older generations have found that they are so very important. And we're going to get right into that. What is that piece of equipment? It's this one right here, a watch. Now, before we get started, I am not a watch snob, and I'm not going to try to sell you some $600, $700 watch in the comments below because it can, measure your heartbeat and detect airplanes flying overhead. Okay, I'm not going to talk about that stuff. I'm going to talk about basic functions, and then we are going to talk a little bit about some of the functions that you can get on some of the higher end models if you're into that kind of thing. It may be worth your time, maybe not. All right, so why is a watch so critical? Why do military members wear watches? Why do survivalists usually you see them with a watch? Why is this? And why do we have so many young people who have become so dependent upon the system that they have abandoned the watch in everyday use? And a lot of you probably don't wear a watch every day. Most Americans and most people in first world countries have abandoned their watch because it's redundant to their cell phone. But in a survival situation, in a disaster situation, in an SHTF situation, a watch could be so very important. Let's get into it. We got different kinds of watches, right? You have your regular clock watches, right? Analog watches. And then you have your digital watches. I'm a fan of the digital watch because I think you can do some things with that are really important. But if you're really into seeing those things spin around, go for it. Okay, some of the things that we can do for survival, understanding the time is so very important. Why? If you get into a long-term survival situation, what's the date? Knowing what month it is could be very important. And if you're not castaway, scraping on a rock, trying to track what month it is and stuff like that, it could be very important for you to know what month. That may not be so important to you, but when is it going to get dark? That is more important. If you're trying to figure out how far you can go or how much work you can get done before the sun goes down, if you know exactly when the sun's going to go down because you checked it last night, and you know what time it is now, you know how many hours you have yet to work. If you're traveling distances, if you're trying to make sure that you get home before dark, you need to know when is it going to get dark, what time it is now, and you can calculate rather easily how far you can go and when you need to turn back and head home. These are very important things. Survival, you don't want to be caught out in the wilderness or without shelter as it's getting dark if you stop too late. If you're not building shelter, if you're not getting that fire going, there are things that you need to do to get things going. Now you say, well, I don't think everything's going to collapse. I don't think I'm going to be caught out in the wilderness. I don't think, okay. Well, military members aren't in a collapse scenario, and yet they wear watches. Why is that? Coordination is very important. If I tell you that we're going to meet at such and such a place at 1:15, that's kind of hard to gauge if you don't have a watch or of some sort. You say, well, I just use my phone. The phone uses a lot of battery. What happens if the electricity stops working? You say, you're getting back into that whole grid down situation. It's not a grid down situation. Talk to the folks that have been through hurricanes. Talk to the folks who were in Texas last year. Talk to the folks who have been through wildfires. When you lose power, if you haven't charged up your phone, what happens if you're just about to go charge your phone when the power goes out? Do you have the capacity to recharge your phone? That's something to have. You should have some power banks that are charged up that you can get some charges on your phone. But watches don't need to be recharged. I bought this El Cheapo watch like 6 months ago. Normally I get a few years out of them. These have been giving me some trouble. Maybe I shouldn't be quite so cheap. But I don't charge my watch. I haven't even thought about it. 6 months and it just works. It continues to work. It still lights up. I can still see it in the dark. That's important. If you don't have to worry about something, it's one more thing that you can worry about that you weren't worrying about before, right? Something else that you can focus in on and take care of because you don't have to worry about charging your clock, right? Because your watch just works. Stopwatch. Stopwatch function is huge. If you're cooking, you need a stopwatch. And I know a lot of you are saying, once again, I just use my phone. And for a lot of cases, that might just be great for day-to-day use. But if there's a grid down situation, that's important. Also, maybe you don't have pockets, right? You're carrying a phone around everywhere you go. Ever lose your phone? There's so many different reasons why having a watch around the house is important. Having to fish that phone out so you can check the time. It's just easier when it's attached to the wrist. I suggest that it's easier to check that way when you're working on something, you have your hands full, and you can just check your watch. It's a marvelous invention, the wristwatch, that has developed over many, many centuries, and in the last few years, people have just kind of chucked out the window and just said, we don't need this anymore. So coordination, timing things for cooking, right? Knowing when it's going to get dark, or even possibly the date if necessary. These things are important. But also, here's one that you probably haven't thought about, or maybe you have. But when I was hiking on the Appalachian Trail, you get rather good if you walk day in, day out to get an understanding of how far you're traveling by your gait. So I could kind of tell, like, I was going 2 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour, or 2.5, or it's going really, really slow, so maybe more like 1 mile an hour. And then when I had my watch, I could tell within 1/10 of the mile exactly where I was. I'd be like, oh, okay, the next shelter I know is such and such in miles forward of me. And as I was walking and everything like that, then I would just be like, I should be seeing it right now. And I turn the corner and there it is. Because you can get really, really accurate understanding of how far you're traveling once you get really used to walking and having a watch to keep accurate time. It's hard to do that. The military teaches you how to pace, which is a good strategy and everything like that. For us people who haven't practiced it quite so much, it is easier just to watch it on your watch, right? So that tells you distances, particularly when you're traveling longer distances. So that's another thing that you maybe haven't thought about. Alarm clock. It's important for you to wake up. If you're doing guard duty or rotations or stuff like that, you need to wake up in the middle of the night and go out into guard duty, right? And that's being able to tell how long before, if you're doing like a walking the perimeter, like how long until you need to walk the perimeter again, a watch once again. And you say, well, once again, I can just use my cell phone. And here's the thing. You light up your cell phone in the dark to check out, that puts off a whole lot of light. This doesn't put off much light. This is very easy to conceal and check. Some of the models in the military and stuff like that have a flap that go over them to kind of conceal it even further for reflection and such like that. Cell phones don't come like that. It's just another thing that makes watches very good. So if you're putting together a loadout kit for yourself, you might be thinking about watch. So what are some special things that you can get on your watch? Yeah, okay, you can get altitude sensors so you can tell how high up you are. You can get a barometer on there. You can tell the weather is changing and such so that you know that rain's coming or a front's moving through. That can be important as well. There's ones with GPS built into them, so you can tell exactly where you are. That's interesting too. Compasses built into the watches, so you can tell which direction you're going. All these kind of things could be useful, and the more you get added onto your thing, if you get it EMP proof, where it's sealed and protected against EMP, all these things are going to cost you more and more and more and more. I'm a sucker for redundancy. I'd rather have 4 or 5 cheap items that can be replaced rather than having one expensive thing that I'm counting on to never fail me. If you do have that really nice one that should never fail you, make sure you have a backup one as well. Get a cheap one and put it in an EMP-proof bag. So that's just some thoughts for you. Hopefully I've made you think about watches. I love my watch. I go everywhere with my watch. I've traveled all over the world with my watch, and it is just so very useful. And I don't understand why people don't wear watches more. Maybe you're one of them, and you have good reasons, and you've gone this route, the phone, or you just don't care about time at all. Maybe you're just that kind of personality. But there's a lot of reasons to have watches. If you have some other good ideas of why you should have a watch or other uses for timekeeping devices, please put them in the comments below. And you can use them for navigation as well. If you're using the analog version, there's some tricks with that. I forgot to mention that. But you can kind of just make do with that by using sticks in the ground too, but that's my defense of the digital watches again. All right, Steve Poplar, out.